So this is the yard?
Yes, this is the yard. We have a lot of piles. I feel like it looks like organized chaos, but there is actually a lot of organization to it. So we will have sort of the mostly wood, but a little bit dirty wood pile. The second pile was the cleaned wood. And then the third pile is the wood chips. After it goes through our grinder, it gets all chipped up and made into a wood chip product, and that's what gets loaded out as the finished material.
That's this?
Yes. But then there's another pile that's all metal, right? Or a different kind of metal, and that will be loaded out like that. And then there's another pile in the far corner that's all drywall, so it just looks like a big mountain of white. Inside some of the warehouses, we have bales of cardboard or bales of different kinds of metals or bales of different kinds of plastic.
All of those piles of stuff, that's from development. And if you live in Philly, you know how much building and demolition goes on and just how much waste comes out of it.
And since folks can't see this, like how big is this pile?
Oh, yeah, so size is relative. It's big, but it's not the biggest I've seen it. It's actually not too big to me, but it is pretty big. I mean, I'd say it's 20 feet tall. But yeah, it can get pretty big. We've already shipped out several trucks of wood chips today, so it can get bigger. But this is a good manageable size. It's ready for the morning, ready for the next load.
Welcome to the Circle Up podcast, where we tell the stories of the circular economy in Philadelphia.
Well, so let's circle up.
I'm Candace Lawton, the Executive Director of Circular Philadelphia.
And I'm Sam Witchen, one of the co-founders of Circular Philadelphia.
Over the last decade, Philadelphia has seen a major development boom. Everywhere you look, something new is going up.
And just as often, something old is coming down. Renovations, teardowns, full-scale rebuilds, it's a constant churn.
And that churn shows up in the numbers. Every year, Philadelphia issues around 64,000 building permits. That's a huge amount of activity for a city our size.
And with all that building and rebuilding comes a massive waste stream that most people never think about.
In the United States, we produce more than 600 million tons of construction and demolition waste every year. That's more than twice the amount of regular household trash Americans throw out nationwide year over year.
And here's the kicker. Roughly 145 million tons of that C&D waste ends up in landfills. In fact, C&D materials make up about 40% of everything going into landfills nationwide.
Which means, if we want to talk seriously about circularity, climate, and clean neighborhoods, we have to talk about construction and demolition waste.
So in this episode, we're digging into what's driving all of this material, what happens to it once it leaves a job or demolition site, and what Philadelphia can do differently.
Because inside that rubble and debris is one of the biggest circular economy opportunities our city has.
That's right. Our first guest is Alan Burns, owner of Richard S. Burns Recycling Company. He's been working for decades to keep materials out of landfills and in circulation, from metals to wood to concrete. We're going to hear how his company navigates the challenges and opportunities of C&D recycling in Philadelphia.
Let's dive in and hear from Alan about what it really takes to turn what most people see as rubble into resources.
My name's Alan Burns, and we are at Richard S. Burns & Company in North Philadelphia. Well, we're primarily construction material recycling. We do dumpsters, drop-off service, and Tommy carts. My father started as a sole proprietor, basically doing clean-outs, salvaging, kind of like a scrapping kind of thing. He used to go around when he was younger and pick up recyclables out of the waste stream. 79 or 80 or so, he bought a rag and junk shop located at the corner of Rising Sun and Bristol called Harry's Rag and Junk. And he started buying non-ferrous metal. He also had a roll-off truck at that time. So he had some commercial accounts and he had some construction accounts. After buying Harry's, Waste Management came into the picture somewhere in the beginning of the 80s, and they started buying out landfills and things like that. And so the game became to get a little competitive at that point. I mean, it's hard to say whether my dad was just that cheap or he had a lot of foresight, but my dad was very thrifty. I mean, he just was very good with money, and he didn't want to pay to dump something that he didn't have to pay to dump, is what it came down to. He would, when Waste Management started to raise the fees, before it was so cheap to dump it didn't really matter what you were doing. But Waste Management came and they raised the tipping fees to landfill so high that it was like, you really can't afford to dump with the amount of money that we were charging our customers. So my dad, we dumped the load out on the ground in our yard, that rag and junk shop that he bought. And we'd say, well, hey, there's cardboard. I can send that over to Durazio. The iron, I can send that over to Richmond. The concrete, Winzinger just opened up a concrete recycling plant. I can take that over to Winzinger. So there was a lot of materials that didn't need to go to the landfill. Then my father and my older sister took a tour around the country to see how other people are managing recyclable materials. And that was probably 82. My dad, they were driving down the highway and they seen this machine that was shredding up alfalfa. And my dad pulled over, went to take a look at it and said, well, if we beef this up, I can get it to do wood. So we started to grind wood and used it as boiler fuel and bulking agents for sewage treatment. And it just kept evolving kind of from there. Another interesting story, I never liked school. I worked for my dad in the summer and I did construction work. And when I'd come out of school, I couldn't figure out what they were teaching me in school, how that played into what I was doing at work. And nothing seemed to match. So I was like, why am I going to school? Everything I learned in school doesn't have anything to do with what I'm doing at work. I dropped out in the 9th grade and I went to work full-time for my dad. And I learned everything here at Burns Company, working with attorneys, accountants, consultants, I mean, just the whole gamut that you deal with in business. That made sense to me. I own Richard S. Burns & Company. I'm the 2nd generation owner. And then we have 100 employees. When I first started here, there was 5 of us. And now we're a little over 100. So in the 80s, there was no equipment out there to recycle. There was nobody really recycling or doing what we wanted to do. There was no software. So we had to create things. And then with creating things, you have to accept failure, because you're going to create something and it's not going to work. And then you have to do it again. And then it may not work again. And then 2 or 3 years later, you're thinking, well, geez, you know what? I should have did it this way. And you end up redoing it 3 or 4 times. So it was all just, an evolution. Trial and error, right? We deal with anywhere from small contractors to the largest contractors and everything in between. So a small contractor that comes into our facility with a construction load that he remodeled somebody's house. He comes in here, he'll get weighed, he'll go to a tipping area, they unload their materials, and then they go way out, and then they grab their free pretzel and water, and they leave. So when your material comes to our facility, it gets dumped out on the ground. Nobody touches that load until it is 100% sorted, because that's the cleanest it's ever going to be. If I move it or touch it from there, it's only going to get worse, right? So I invented these sorties, and we put the sorties right next to the load, and there's 3 guys that go through the load. It takes them maybe a half an hour, 45 minutes to pull all the recyclables out of the load. Every sortie is for a different commodity. And then I can take the sortie over to a scale and weigh it and report back to you accurately how many pounds of material came out of your specific load. And then those sorties deliver the commodities to wherever their next destination is. So we have these surge piles, like for a concrete crusher or for iron and for cardboard. Before they get further processed, we store them up in a pile, and when they get the pile gets big enough, then we process the pile. The Tommy carts are the kind of the same thing. So we invented the Tommy carts here. The Tommy carts go right to the job site. You wheel it right up to the working face, wherever you're working at. You load the Tommy cart up. You take it down the loading dock. I pick it up with a box truck. They have barcodes on them, so I know where it came from. I know what job site it came from. It comes back to my facility. We scan the cart. It populates a computer system. I weigh it. It dumps it on the conveyor line, and there's sorters that pick the material out. So there's only 2 people that touch the load. There's only 1 transition point, and I can report back, and I'm getting an average of 75% recovery rate on the Tommy carts, up to a little over 90%, depending on what type of material comes in our facility. Some of the loads that come into our facility are complete trash, and there's not much you can pull out of them. And there's some that come in that are like 90% recoverable. I sort the material out on the ground, I get 60% to 70% recovery, depending on where the material comes from. We try to get to the end user, right? Our goal is to get the highest value that we can because we have a really good product. So I want to get to a smelter, I want to get to a cardboard mill. I don't want to sell to an intermediate guy that's going to sell to a guy that's going to sell to a guy. I want to be at the end market at the highest I can be, right? So we get the highest dollar for the material that we're sending out. We have more than 1 outlet for each material, right? Because if something happens at outlet, we don't want to be stuck with a lot of material. So we try to have at least 2 or 3 outlets for each material going out the door, including the residual, which will be like a landfill cover, alternate daily cover, or a waste energy facility that takes the MSW. So anything that we can't recycle that can't be turned into a daily cover product will go to a waste energy facility like a Cavanta or something like that. We'll go to one of 3 Cavanta facilities. York Solid Waste has a waste energy facility. And if the rates or availability isn't there, we'll use the landfill if we have to. When I go to sell materials or process materials and save money, like some materials I get paid for on the way out, which help pay for my labor. And then there's other materials that's cost avoidance that cost far less to dispose of than a landfill would charge, right? So if I'm paying $30 or $40 a ton to get rid of something and I got paid $120 a ton, so okay, I got $90 a ton to pay for my labor and the upkeep of the facility. So it kind of boils down to almost about the same as what landfill costs are after I pay all my material costs and labor costs. But I'm not landfilling it. Landfilling is never a good idea, right? I mean, there's so many, you have no idea what happens, the chemical reactions that happen in a landfill, right? So when you talk to landfill people, they have no idea what happens underneath the surface of the landfill. I mean, once these chemicals and everything start to mix together, I mean, it's unpredictable results is what most of them tell you. It's unpredictable what's happening underneath the surface of the landfill. I mean, they capture the gas, they degrade the material, but at the end, you end up with this pile of mixed chemicals that you really don't even know what they are. So when you start digging through it to recover it, like, you really don't know what happened. Oh, and if it's just a waste. I mean, you had the material in your hand, like for construction material. You pulled a piece of plasterboard off the wall, you had it in your hand, like, let's just maximize our efficiency, right? Well, you got it in your hand, put it someplace that it's gonna be recycled, rather than causing problems down the road and mishandling materials, using more energy to, solve that problem. I don't know. It's education is what it is. There's no education in this industry to teach people where to go, how to do things, and what the value is, right? So we end up trying to educate our customers as much as we can. Regulations are probably the most irritating. The state and the city, I mean, they mandate and they want you to recycle, but then they come in and they over-regulate the facilities to the point where it almost prohibits you from doing your job. So that's one of the most frustrating things that I think. In the 96, 97 era, the state decided that mom and pop companies shouldn't be in the waste processing business. It should only be national companies and counties or municipalities that run recycling facilities, because we don't have the resources to do what we're doing. Like, instead of trying to help somebody, if they got together with the industry and said, hey, how can we increase recovery rates and how can we do these things, it would be a lot more effective.
So how did you get involved with Circular Philadelphia?
Well, actually I seen them on LinkedIn. I asked Ryan to reach out to Nick, and I said, hey, invite the guys in, because there was some confusion in there about the short dumping that goes on in the city, right? Because short dumping is a big problem, and it's always been a problem. Ever since I was a kid, there's been people dumping on the side of the road. People were complaining because our rates were so high, because we're the highest facility tipping wise in the city, but we are the only people that have, I guess, the dynamics with recycling and the amount of people recovering. And I said, well, look, you guys you got to understand, it's just education. Come through our facility, see what we do, see what it takes to run the facility, see everything that we do. And they did. And they brought a bunch of people through here, and there was a handful of people that were of that mindset that you guys are charging too much money and you're part of the problem. Why are you charging a minimum charge? Why are you charging so much? And after they toured the facility, they're kind of like, okay, I get it. You have like so many people on the ground, you treat the people good, your equipment, it's like you got tons of equipment around here, what it costs to maintain the facility. So I think it was a really good education process for those guys. We deal with probably about 300 small trucks a day, and I don't know, we have 600 dumpsters. I think we probably 80 dumpsters, we probably bring in 80 loads a day, and our Tommy carts is another probably 20 some loads a day we get with our Tommy carts. So we're licensed to take 1,200 ton a day. We don't come close to that. I think we're somewhere around 500 to 600 ton a day. But it's a lot of material, trying to process 500 to 600 ton a day. And the thing about that is maintaining the facility. Like, if I have to carry inventory in case something breaks, if I can't get it off the shelf in a week or in 2 days, I have to have it in inventory, because if my grinder goes down or something goes down and breaks down, I can't process material. So now hundreds of tons of material get backed up until I can get back operational again, right? So my maintenance team and facility team really needs to be on point so that we don't shut down. There's a large percentage of our customers that when they come here and they see that their material is being recycled, like it's being recycled right in front of their eyes. Like they're literally throwing material off their truck, and the load that's next to them that somebody threw off, our guys are sorting through and recycling it. So they kind of know that the material is being recycled, and they can kind of see to the degree that we're doing it. There's materials like iron that have an endless lifespan. You can just keep reusing iron and scrapping it and reusing it and scrapping it. Cardboard is kind of the same way. Wood is kind of like, after you recycle it once, it's done. It's either like goes into a mulch or goes into some type of boiler fuel or something, and then the life expectancy is gone. Non-ferrous metals have kind of an endless kind of stream as well like that. Plastics, I would say, they have a limited, because eventually it gets down to like a mixed rigid, and then it gets turned into like a junk plastic. So the lifespan of those are a little limited. But I'd say volume-wise, I'd say our wood is the most. Like wood, plasterboard, iron, cardboard, kind of like in that, and then plastics is probably at the end. Because plastics, there's like thousands of different types of plastic. I had no idea. But I mean, there are vinyl sidings, there's different than, your mixed rigids, HDPEs and different things. The buckets we have a different market for buckets than we do for milk crates, and there's different market for vinyl siding than there is for buckets, and it's just, plastics aren't the same. There's just tons of different plastics. We want to bring a maximum value to the customer, and it costs a little extra money to do that. Not only are we environmentally sustainable, we're economically sustainable, right? So these fellows that are sorting through our materials over there, these guys are making $16 some an hour. They get health benefits, they get overtime. So I mean, they're averaging probably $45,000 a year recycling materials, and they find a treasure trove of material. Like, people throw out the craziest things, and our guys are like, oh, they'll pick up like costume jewelry, and they'll take it and cleaning it up, and it's a fun job for those guys. But then when they come in, your entry level position is a sorter. Then they can move up to a forklift operator, a loader operator. They can move into the construction department. They can move into welding. They can move into the maintenance department, and we train people and move them up and promote them. So there's guys that have been here 30 years that started as sorters and that are still here. I want to try to duplicate what we're doing here in other like-minded businesses across the country, because it's a system that works. So anybody who's serious about recovery and economics in their facility, they see that we recover 60% versus they can invest $20 million into this big huge MRF and get 20% recovery. I don't want to own anything. I want to partner with people who have a facility that are interested in copying what we're doing here. So just like the Tommy carts, like we lease the Tommy cart equipment, and then we have the software and the sorting system, and it's all patented, and the sorties that are on the ground and the system to use the sorties is all patented. And I want to try to get people to use that and increase their recovery and become more efficient in other areas. So we have like partners in Tennessee, Rockwood Sustainable Solutions. We have Taz, which is Economy Disposal in Chicago, who's coming on board. There's Next Waste, I think Recon in Texas, that's joining us as well. Michael Brothers in Pittsburgh, and they're kind of coming along as well. So we have 5 or 6 other facilities that are interested in trying to increase their efficiency and their recovery. We really need to start thinking about, when you build a building, eventually they're going to do either a renovation or they're going to demolish the building, and you need to think about what's going to happen to that building as you're building it. So these architects, they build all these great buildings and they look phenomenal, but I'm thinking, like, if anybody ever went to recycle that, you're not going to get the recovery rate out of it, right? They're using cheaper, like these glued laminates and particle boards and things like that aren't really recyclable. I've been seeing a lot more of that, and like foams and composite materials. So like I went to China, and their buildings are made out of like inert materials, right? So they start out with concrete, they'll put terracotta on the inside, they'll put plaster on the walls, they'll put tiles down, and anything that's in the building, like appliances or things like that, when they go to knock the building down, they take all the appliances and everything out of it, and the only thing that's left is basically inert materials. They demolish the building and they use it for clean fill, I guess, and level out their land, and they'll build a new building. Like here, we're using a lot of different foams and different things. Like, it's just, I don't know. Not comparing us to China, I think we're in far better shape, but I think that we need to just start thinking about how we build our buildings. Well, I mean, ultimately, that's what makes sense, right? I mean, that's what's sustainable. I mean, what's not sustainable is, landfill. I mean, there's a need for landfills, but it's the overuse or the convenience of just, throwing something away. And that's just not it's not sustainable. If we all adopted that policy and just threw everything away, I mean, eventually we all be consumed by some type of landfill. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's just like, it's like a waste, right? Like, you're gonna run out of resources at some point, right? And it just becomes ultra wasteful. Done, you know, but reusing materials is absolutely a key part of not being a wasteful society with that mindset.
That was Alan Burns from Richard S. Burns & Company, servicing the River Wards, Philadelphia, and beyond with their material recovery services.
When we first started Circular Philadelphia, we knew the built environment was such an important piece of advancing the circular economy in the region because of what you heard at the beginning of the episode about how much development and redevelopment is happening in the city. It's one of our main market focus areas for a reason, and in fact, our very first member, Revolution Recovery, who you'll hear from next, operates in that space.
My name is Fern Gukin, and I work for Revolution Recovery. We recycle construction and demolition debris. We are going into our 21st year, so we've been around since 2004, but at the time, the founders, it was just an idea. They were kind of high school buddies that had, were looking to start a business, and they heard about construction waste recycling, and there was a big void in the market. So they first started looking at drywall and said, well, maybe we can just focus on that. And they found outlets for drywall and ability to recycle it. And soon they found that the customers that had the drywall had all of this other stuff too. So they started looking for options for all kinds of materials that come in mixed construction loads. And the business just grew from there. So it grew from this idea in 2004 to right now we have 3 different facilities and process between 1,200 and 1,500 tons of material every day. Every day. So 3 million pounds in, 3 million pounds out every day. There's been an incredible amount of development in the River Wards in the last, really since Revolution Recovery's been around for the last 20 years, but certainly in the last, I'd say 10 years or so. And so our trucks are in the River Wards every single day. I guess one of a big, notable project that we were on for a long time was the Piazza when they were renovating that just recently. We had multiple trucks picking up material there every single day, in and out. I would say that most of our customers might know that we recycle, or they might, find that interesting or helpful, or they support that, but they're primarily driven by price and service. Are we competitive with the landfill? Are we competitive with other facilities other transfer stations that are taking these materials? So we have to be able to be competitive in the market and compete on service. I think that if you are in the waste industry, you realize how pervasive it is. Everybody has waste, and there are dumpsters absolutely everywhere. In Philadelphia, the material that we're trying to get is mostly new construction, but we do work with some demolition companies as well, but also industrial and manufacturing debris. So other companies that have a lot of cutoffs from whatever product that they're making, we'll work with them as well. So I think that's like an unrealized waste stream. A lot of people don't think about waste or where it comes from or what a big sector it is, but absolutely every industry everywhere is producing waste all of the time. And so while we want them to reduce their waste, if they can't or if they need to get rid of it, we'd rather it come to somewhere like us where we're recycling it and diverting some of that from landfill, or as much as we possibly can. In the typical model, materials will go right into the landfill, and there's many reasons why landfills are bad, but I think some of the biggest concerns are environmental reasons. So landfills are one of the largest producers of methane emissions in the US. So the more material that's going in there, it's decomposing and then releasing all of these greenhouse gases. And so we want to try to keep materials out of landfill as much as possible to reduce that. But there's also an economic factor to that. On the East Coast, in our region, there's not a lot of room to make new landfills. So the faster we keep filling them up, the more we'll have to open up new landfills and take, virgin land or virgin areas and then make them into a landfill, which isn't good for the environment. But it also becomes very expensive because those areas are further and further away from where people live. So if the cost of waste is going up, that will have a really big impact. If landfills are closing, landfills are filling up. So the more we can reduce our waste, it's going to save us money, but also help preserve the environment. From a circularity standpoint, contractors are buying materials for their job site. Hopefully they have some recycled content in them, but then they will come, anything that they can't use or there's cut-off materials will go into a dumpster. That material will come here. Most of the material that we received is all mixed together, commingled in one dumpster, and we're in the separation business. So those materials we separate out and we target a bunch of different material streams: cardboard, wood, rubble, metals, drywall, things like that. And then that material will bale up, or we might grind it or process it to some extent, but that'll go on to a secondary processor where that facility might break open the bale of cardboard, wet it down, release all of the fibers and make it back into new cardboard or paper products. So usually there's a secondary and sometimes a tertiary processor between us and the next, the next part of having those materials come full circle back in the loop. So we are separating those materials essentially and then getting them to that next processing phase. It's a pretty manual process. We do have a lot of heavy equipment, excavators and loaders and forklifts and stuff like that, sort lines and conveyor belts, but most of the material is sorted by hand. In some recycling facilities, like where your bottles and cans go to, there's a lot more automation and robotics and optical sorters and things like that, but the material is also very consistent. A water bottle is generally the same size every single time, but ours tends to be a lot more manual because a piece of wood could be a small 2x4 cutoff, it could be a 4x8 sheet of plywood or a pallet or something like that. So it's hard to automate that, and to keep the integrity of the material, we want to recover as much whole as possible. Not everything is recyclable. Well, that's not true. I think everything is recyclable, but it depends on if there's somewhere for the next step for it to go to. And so there's a lot of materials that we get that have no other home, right? A lot of different grades of plastic. They might be able to be recovered or recycled if there was another processing facility nearby, or if the technology was there to be able to process it, to be able to make it a quality feedstock to go back into the circular loop. And if that outlet doesn't exist, it makes it really challenging for us. Well, not everything stays in the loop because of that. We have a whole team of people that is focused on outlets and trying to manage our existing outlets, but also keep our outlets diversified, because we don't want to be too reliant on only one place where certain materials go, because there's always movement in the markets. So we're challenged by those end markets and also by volume. So sometimes we might get a kind of plastic that is highly recyclable, but we might only get 20 pounds of it. And the buyers generally want to buy 20 tons of material at a time. So if we're just getting 20 pounds here or there, we don't have the real estate to be able to keep storing all those little bits. We're a pretty large volume with the amount of tons that come in and out every day. So we are always looking for diversity in the materials that we do recover regularly, and we rely on a lot of our really strong partnerships and existing relationships. But we're also looking for new outlets for materials that we don't know can be have an outlet at this point in time. So those materials that are currently going to landfill are not able to be diverted. We're always looking for better homes for that, or better opportunities for, what's the latest technology, who might be able to take this material from us. We'd love to see more places that could take some of these complex materials, or could take some of the materials that we encounter every day, and there's just nowhere for us to send it. There's no outlet. So that's where, I'd really love to see like a bigger push for legislation, or other, again, it's another business void. Like there's an opportunity for these secondary and tertiary processors to make that feedstock to go back into recycled products. I think that there's opportunity as far as like growth in the circular economy, or maybe the materials that I think we don't have a lot of options for. I feel like I keep going back to plastics, but plastics are really complicated, and we just keep consuming more and more plastics. It's like by leaps and bounds, there's more and more plastic waste generated every single year, and there's not a lot of options for recycling. And so I think there's a huge market void in that. And I think, thinking about deconstruction and the ability for materials to be disassembled a little bit better is another avenue that I don't know that we necessarily have. It's like the inbound material that comes to us, sometimes it's really complicated. Think about that, the roofing insulation board that's just almost impossible to recycle as it is, at least with the technology that there is now. But there's a lot of papers and weatherproofing barriers or whatever that's adhered onto expanded polystyrene, which maybe any of those things could be recycled on their own, but it's really hard to separate them. So just looking at the quality of the inbound, and then working on the quality of the outbound to keep everything in that circular loop is something that I think we're focused on. It's so easy to just throw something away, but I think we should really pause and think about that a little bit more. Could you use it for something else? Is this material that you've bought at your job site, like maybe you've bought all of this lumber because you think you're going to need it, you don't want to run out, and you're going through your framing process, but then you finish your framing and you have to move on to the next phase. And so instead of returning that lumber or taking it to the next job or storing it for the next job in 6 months, you might throw it into a dumpster, which I think there's a missed opportunity there, because there's other organizations or people, or there's still, that material is still good and it's still usable. And I think that's where those reuse centers come in, is how do we make those connections? Like there's not really a central place to be able to take that material to get it back into use, or how do you capture that value or that missed opportunity? And that part of the circular economy is really interesting. We didn't talk much about rare yet, but Rare has been focusing a little bit more on that circular economy. Can they intercept some of the materials that come into Revolution Recovery's waste stream, pull out some good lumber that they might find, and get it out to neighborhood farms or whatever it might be, to be able to keep that material in use longer and actually get it to people who need it and maybe don't want to spend their precious resources on buying new lumber or new whatever it might be.
Yeah. So let's talk about Rare. What is Rare? How did it come about?
Okay. Whew. Yeah. So Rare is a separate nonprofit organization that is housed within Revolution Recovery. It's an acronym, RAIR. It stands for Recycled Artist in Residency. So a residency program, if you're not familiar, artists, it's a common thing that artists do, will apply for a residency to have dedicated time to focus on their work. So artists apply from all over the world to come to Rare and Revolution Recovery to have studio space and access to the materials that come in through the waste stream. It was actually my thesis project in grad school. I went to school for sustainable design and was really interested in these ideas about materials. And I knew of Revolution Recovery, and I knew that they were friendly to artists. So they connected me with an artist named Billy Dufala, and sure enough, the owners of Revolution Recovery were right.
My name is Billy Dufala. I am the co-founder and creative director at Rare. So, I mean, I think I was always the materials guy, aka hoarder. But also having to do with growing up poor. I remember early on also being really interested in alternative economies, thinking about the city as a resource. And learning from what materials have baked into them in terms of the stories of their past lives and things like that. And you know, coming from a sculpture department, it really is about community, and like you don't do this work on your own. So in a sense, there's always this kind of paying it forward to a certain degree, because it's not just about you. So for me, I think gaining access to like transfer stations while I was even still a student was like difficult. Like, people don't want you in those places. And I always dreamt about the Recology program in the Bay. It's an artist in residency really about the waste that was coming through their waste stream. It's a worker-owned or worker-shared company, from what I understand, but it's franchised out on the West Coast. I just heard about it and was like, oh, Philly needs one of these. Oh, Philly would be an amazing city. Because I had already, as a student and as an emerging, you know, a recent grad and you know, my studio practice, I was already doing it in a very informal way. And I'm like, yeah, that as an institution in this city would be absolutely amazing. But, you know, so it was a dream. I remember specifically trying to source architectural glass for a studio mate and reaching out to a friend, Bob Beatty. Bob's like this sage kind of, you know, OG, if you would, just somebody who's revered in our community for starting Provenance back in the day. But anyway, Bob told me about this place, Revolution Recovery, which I had never heard of before, and encouraged me to get in touch with them. And I called them up, and at the time, this is 2009, Revolution Recovery was really still getting started. I think they were sharing the property here with another company. And I would just remember coming in, going right past the scale, right to the tipping floor. And the foreman, who's a friend of mine now, was like, hey, you guys the artists? Hey, and he was like really chummy and happy to see us. And we got like $25,000 worth of glass for $200. And I was just like, oh, whoa, who's the owners? And Avi Golan, who was one of the founding associates of Revolution Recovery, John and Avi. I was like, can I bring my students here? He's like, absolutely not. As luck would have it, they were lecturing at Philly U, where Fern was getting her master's, and they made the introduction to me and Fern. And so yeah, that's how I got. That's my. Oh, and just to complete the story, as luck would have it, Fern, I helped Fern with her thesis, got in deeper here in the process, and as luck would have it, Fern was hired by Revolution Recovery when she graduated, and the rest is history. So the residency really started, we piloted this thing called the Biggie Shorty, which is a big project in a shorter period of time. You're working towards a document. And then after you've made the work, you've documented it, you've staged it, you've performed it, you've filmed it, you've photographed it, it goes back into the waste stream. And that really began that informal piloting. But that gave way to a formal space where our first open call, we had a standard residency and we had a Biggie Shorty residency. And the standard is really like you gain access to the tipping floor, you pool materials, you have a project space in a shop, and you're kind of self-guided working on your project that you proposed in the application process. And then we also were still made that Biggie Shorty because it's very different from the standard residency and how an artist can take advantage of the material resources. It really is more about sight. It's about experimentation and exploration and kind of going beyond the confines of like a studio practice and thinking bigger, and it's more challenging. Artists gain an incredible amount of value from the material they're gleaning coming through the yard and through that waste stream. But over time, we become experts in, and of course, Fern went to grad school for sustainability. So you are in the best suited, vantage point to glean material value, but also to consult with the expertise in the world of sustainability and environmental issues when it comes to building and construction. But how this is all really the back end of the built environment, it's all here. So over time, that let's just say that knowledge base, or I like to call it cumulative toolbox of the answers for the questions that artists have brought to us over the last 10 years, that's available to any cohort that comes after them. That's like another form of that paying forward kind of why we are such a unique institution, if you would, as scrappy as we are. The work that we've done with the art program historically, that's the last 10 years. It's a flagship program. Over the last couple years, we've been running this, we call it the circular pilot, which is, materials redistribution program, working exclusively for the most part with urban farms and gardens, where it's a redistribution of dimensional lumber and other things that are typically going to landfill that are like budget line items at community farms and gardens. And it's been slow, but it's established its own footprint out on the remediated Superfund site. That's our neighbor. We have a shipping container full of lumber, and we've worked with almost 10 community partners over the last couple of years. That, as a parallel to the art program, benefits artist practices, but also acknowledges the creative nature of urban agriculture. And for us, as a way to inform, educate, but also make better use out of a lot of these materials, slowly, I as like creative directors see this braiding of, interdisciplinary practice over a longer period of time. And I really think that there's a lot of interesting opportunities along the way. In the longer arc of the work that Rare has been doing and wants to be doing, I think this is a really important program area that I'm excited about seeing it grow capacity and understanding how it lays the groundwork for interesting cross-disciplinary practice into the future. I've had quite a few people reach out about starting programs similarly, and I don't feel great about this question, but my question that I usually, after talking about it, is what's your relationship with a host facility like? Because I really think that I know Rare wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the support, encouragement, and permissions granted by Revolution Recovery. And I think that there's a lot of magic in me and Fern having met when we did at the age that Revolution Recovery was at, and where they started growing as a company, we established and started forming the nonprofit. So I do think that there's a model both with Recology and Rare, and there's other, I think there's something in Moab that is similar. And there's little, more informal programs that have sprouted up, and then, if they're still around, I'm not exactly sure. but it really is that partnership. I worry for my own mental health and spiritual health that I've become a little numb to the scale and frequency at which all of this material is moving in this just one site, but aware of how prevalent it is in throughout the country. In our exit interviews, it's almost every single artist who's come through, which is we're getting close to 100. They're just forever changed, and how seeing is different than reading or understanding how these systems operate. When you're immersed in it, it changes, I would say, even potentially part of your spirit and maybe even your molecular construct. Like, there's something that happens once you've witnessed the volume. I liken it to being traumatizing in low dose, but also as novel as it is and as exciting, it can be heartbreaking too, because this is the reality. I think our whole relationship with material would be a lot more environmentally right-sized if every American had to come spend some time in a place like this. I think the witnessing of what material impact is in its use and post use value, I think the idea that we are all contributing to this and how we are all part of these systems is really easy to forget about when you're not in some way in direct relation to the volume or the waste stream.
Waste, I think, is an invisible cost, because in Philadelphia and in a lot of municipalities, it's just part of the tax structure. We are paying to get rid of waste everywhere, but you don't realize it because it's just part of your daily services. There's certainly some parts of the country where you pay even for your curbside pickup. So I think in those places, it's like there's more of a one-to-one understanding of, oh, you have to pay to get rid of material. But certainly for a contractor or a manufacturer that has material, that's not included or lumped into any taxes or city infrastructure that they would pay. So it really is like this hidden utility that's hard to track and hard to understand, because I think it's not the same model. It's not like you're paying for electricity or you're paying for water or something like that. But yes, contractors have to pay to get rid of material, and as do we all. There is a cost to dispose of waste. A lot of people, the common thing you say is like you throw your waste away, throw it away. But there is really no away, right? It's all has to go somewhere. And one stat that really sticks with me is that in the US, people generate between 4 and 5 pounds of waste per person per day. That's just in your daily life, which is a lot, it all adds up. But the construction industry in the US generates about double that every day. So, everybody has their own impact that they can make, and while you can make an impact in your own life, really expanding the scope of waste, I think, can make a bigger and bigger impact. So if you're thinking about construction materials and how much of this stuff is coming out of these job sites every day, it's a huge amount. So anything we can do to reduce the waste and reuse it and recycle it, keep it out of landfill, work within that waste hierarchy, I think is really important. No need for us to have as much waste that we have. So while that would impact our business, if people started generating a lot less waste, I think that would be like a big win out there for the world anyway. There's plenty of waste for us to keep working on. But
And are you guys members of Circular Philadelphia?
yes, we're one of the first members.
So tell me about that. How did that relationship start?
Sure. Well, we've known Nick and Sam, the founders, for quite a while, and we're always really supportive of their work, and they're always doing really good things in circularity and waste and things like that. So when they were forming the organization and approached us, it was a no-brainer. We said, like, absolutely. Philly needs more. You know, it takes a village. It takes all kinds of companies to be able to come together and solve some of these really complex problems. And so their idea of being more of that convener specifically around waste and having it be pretty local to our region was really attractive to us. And I think it's been incredible. We're really happy to be members and you know, network with a lot of different organizations and do meetups and things like that. We get a lot out of just staying in the know about all of these different waste issues, because while every industry, every part of the circular loop is different, there is a lot of overlap. And there's questions, you know, there's people that have a product that they want to get recycled and they don't know if it's possible. Well, we might know. We might know if there are outlets. We might know how we could handle it operationally if something like that could come in. But then we're also looking for people that might want the stuff that we have that we don't know what to do with. And so being able to talk with a lot of people that have the same interests and have the same challenges, I think is really important. So instead of just focusing on our one little slice, we can see what everybody else is doing and hopefully continue to grow from that and keep, you know, expanding our reach and being more circular. Big picture, I think moving towards a circular economy is really important because we have limited resources. We're limited just in the raw materials that are in the earth, and we're consuming just more and more of them all of the time. But all of those materials, you know, just the raw materials, it takes a lot of electricity and you know, fuel and transportation to process those materials. And so the more localized that we can get with keeping the resources that we have in the loop and available, I feel like we're going to be much better off as a society. There's sort of an upfront cost to get these businesses going and to get them traction and to support them, but I think in the long run, it's going to pay off in dividends if we can save those resources, utilize them better, and keep them out of landfill.
That was Fern Gukin, the Director of Sustainability at Revolution Recovery.
For more information about Richard S. Burns Recycling Company, visit burnscompany.net. And for more information about Revolution Recovery, visit revolutionrecovery.com. And you can check out the work of RARE's artists in residence on their website, rarephilly.org. That's RAIR Philly.org.
In the next episode of Circle Up, we're tackling a question we all face. What do you do when stuff breaks? From phones and appliances to bikes and shoes, tossing isn't the only option. Join us as we explore how fixing what we already have keeps materials in use longer, supports local businesses, and builds a more circular way of living. The Circle Up podcast is presented by Circular Philadelphia. It was produced by Meredith Nutting at Cool Goon Productions. This podcast was supported by a grant from Penn Treaty Special Services District. If you want to learn more about the circular economy, go to circularphiladelphia.org.